Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Paula Di Marco. She's a writer, visual artist, mental health advocate. Welcome to the show, Paula.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Paula. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk
Mhm.
about healing, how one can heal through even grief's darkest moments that we'll learn from you. And that is where it brings me to your story, your journey, your background. Please share a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to and learn from your journey itself.
Yes, absolutely. So I lost my partner Alex to suicide in 2021. It was a very complicated situation. We were together for only a year and a half, the last 6 months living together, and he had experienced trauma throughout his life, which led to his mental illness. And our relationship was very challenging and gradually resulted in an abusive relationship. And after finding him dead in our home, I was left to grapple with the complexities of grief and trauma, while at the same time I was unraveling the truth about who he really was, since I uncovered many lies that he had told during our relationship. And and also after witnessing firsthand what trauma can do to a person, since I was so close to him when I witnessed the decline of his mental health. I knew I needed to face my trauma head on, and that's when I turned to writing. I'm actually a visual artist, which was also painting was a big part of my process, but I ended up turning to writing as a way to process what I was going through, to make sense of it, to find a voice, gave me a shelter and companionship during the loneliness of grief. And I ended up writing a book. Well, today is still a manuscript since I'm looking to publish in the next couple of years. And in the meantime, I write a blog on Substack for anyone who's undergoing unimaginable tragedy or who's playing a support role. And I expand on topics from the book, such as suicide loss, grief, trauma, healing, and resilience.
Right, right, Paula. So, from 2021, if I understand, that was when that difficult time came in your life. Is that how did you look at that situation? Did you look at it as someone going through his problem? Did you look at it as your problem? Did you also look at yourself, you know, as uh, any of the reasons anywhere that you could have helped better? How did you look at this part of grief?
You mean his decision to end his life? How do I look at it now?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, suicide is an extremely complicated subject, and I can only speak to the situation that I witnessed, which I feel it's applicable to many cases. And sometimes what I hear a lot when I share my experience, people always tell me that suicide is such a selfish and an irresponsible choice. And I find that that usually comes from people who have not experienced anything like that. Because if you've been close enough to someone who makes that kind of decision, and I'm going to say decision in quotation marks, you know that it can be a choice when you feel you have no choice, right? You have a much more compassionate approach. And I remember being close to Alex and again witnessing the decline in his mental health and how he was in a state of complete hopelessness, of being unable to envision a better future. He had lost his capacity to have dreams and hopes. He got to a point where he was completely disconnected from the world, from other people, including myself. He was disconnected from himself. And I could see how painful it was for him to continue to show up in this world where, and to continue to show up where he really didn't want to be here. And also, he got to a point where he was kind of like faking to know how to be alive because he just didn't know how to be here anymore. And and I feel that from that place is not really a choice, right? And sometimes when people make comments like that, I feel that it's unfair and it's very unhelpful. People who are already in a suicidal mindset, they're experiencing a lot of shame, like a lot of shame, right? And that sometimes is what the shame and the judgment that comes from themselves and from others is what prevent them from seeking help. Because sometimes when they ask for help, they are either dismissed or invalidated. And it's also completely unhelpful to drive a conversation about suicide prevention and awareness. And it makes it extremely hard on the people who lose someone to suicide because they're already experiencing all kind of complex emotions. I remember someone explaining me once that the really challenging thing about a suicide loss is that the person that you miss and the person that you're angry at are the same person, right? Because in your head, you're thinking, they abandoned me, right? They made this choice when they could have had a long, healthy life. So using these kind of words and these judgments doesn't really contribute to finding a solution and supporting people who are in this state.
Was he seeking any medical help? What I want to understand is that uh, family members,
Hmm.
friends, partners who are around such people, what is it that
Okay.
best they can do, and amidst all the help that is coming from also outside?
Yeah, it was a very difficult situation because again it was 21, we're 2021, we're still in the pandemic. We are very isolated from other people, right? It was mostly just the two of us spending a lot of time together. It was a new relationship. I didn't know that many of his friends. None of us had family in the city. I'm from Argentina, have all my family back home. He had some family, but outside of Vancouver, not that close. So in that way, we didn't have that much of a support group, which was very unfortunate because I think that that's very important to have a support network. And then our experiences reaching out to the healthcare system were not great. I remember, so Alex threatened suicide a month before he took his life. And I remember the first thing I did was reach out to his counselor to let him know that this had happened. And I guess I was very naive at the time because I thought there was going to be this protocol in place that now he was going to be supervised and monitored and we are going to make sure he was okay. And nothing really happened. Like I just shared this experience with him. He told me he was going to get in touch with him later that day because they had a counseling session. I don't know what they talk about, right? It was private between the two of them, but nothing happened. And pretty much a month later, I called him to let him know that he was dead. And then the other experience that we had that was very disappointing was with his general practitioner because I was knocking doors everywhere trying to get him support. And I ended up reaching out to a clinic in the US. I don't know if you heard about Amen clinics. They're very famous. They do a lot of work around mental health. And they do a custom treatment for you based on a CT scan of your brain to see how trauma had affected the brain. And all we needed for them to put a custom treatment was a CT scan that you can only get here at the Lionsgate Hospital in North Vancouver. And for that, we needed a requisition from his general practitioner. And we explained the situation to her, and she said it was nonsense, that those kind of treatments didn't work, that he should continue with counseling and doing that work. And she just refused to sign the requisition. So not only would she couldn't offer any help, but she also didn't let us access other resources.
How did this whole event, that thing that happened, impact you, Paula?
In many ways, I think, well, grief was, I think that when I entered grief, I entered a completely new reality, right? Grief changes everything. And also, this was a grief that was aggravated by trauma, because Alex also took his life in a very violent way, and I was the one to find him. And also by the complicated relationship that we had, right? Because after he died, I had to admit to myself that I had been in an abusive relationship, which was not an easy thing. And also, after learning many of the things that he had lied about, I was feeling extremely confused to the point that I really didn't know who I was mourning anymore. And I felt that the right to mourn my loving partner had been taken away from me. So I couldn't really access mourning until like a year after the experience. I didn't even attend his memorial because I didn't want to be in a room with other people who didn't share my experience, who hadn't seen that side of Alex, that he would only show closed doors. Um, and it took me a long time. First, it took me a long time to get to a place. I'm gonna call it forgiveness, but that's not my favorite word because I feel that sometimes forgiveness gives you the impression that you're okay with what happened. And I'm not, I don't think I'll ever be okay with lying and manipulation and abuse. But I did get to a place where I was able to let the anger and the resentment go and to start feeling again the love and compassion that I had for him. And and the trauma part was very complicated because already when a death, what we call out of order death, right? Like a death that is a big tragedy that is not expected. When something like that happens, you are already in a mindset that you're expecting for the next bad thing to happen, right? Because the worst possible thing already happened. And for me, it was aggravated by the trauma that took me to a place of not feeling safe in this world, of being constantly hypervigilant, of having irrational fears. And it took me a really long place to get out of that mindset of realizing, yes, life can be very unpredictable and sometimes really bad things happen. But the truth is also the opposite is also true, right? Sometimes really great things can also happen. And I think that's the place that I've been getting to after more than 3 years. And reconnecting, the biggest challenge was that reconnecting again with all the good things in life.
How did you do that? What was the process? How
Yes.
did you distance yourself from the situation, keeping memories, but keeping away from the trauma?
Yeah. I can tell you what worked for me. It was a long process, and again, it was not a linear process. That doesn't mean that today I don't get triggered sometimes, right, with memories, or I'm still hit by the waves of grief. But it's very different now. My relationship with pain, and for me, it was a process of healing through words and through creativity. I have an amazing counselor which was able to connect with me in ways that no one could, and to with someone that I could fully open up about everything that was going on inside of me. And I also turned to writing. Writing played an amazing role in my life. I started writing pretty much the week after Alex died because I was stuck in a loop, reliving the events from the morning that I found him. And I sat down and I remember I wrote every single detail that I could remember about that morning because I was like, if I can at least download it from my head into somewhere else, may I'll be able to stop thinking about it. And that worked so well that I kept writing about many different isolated episodes. And I was not expecting to write a book by any means. But I got to a point maybe after 5 months, 6 months that I told myself, why don't you just tell the whole story, right? No censoring, no embellishments, no sugarcoating, just things as they happen. And that gave me a voice that I feel I had lost during my relationship with Alex. It gave me a lot of the closure that I needed because, again, the moment that Alex made took his life, I was like instantly expelled from the relationship, right? And without possibility of asking him questions and understanding better why he did what he did, right? So I had to do all that process of closure on my own through writing. And I feel it also offered me a lifeline and companionship that I needed so bad. And I think the other big thing for me, well, two more. One was painting. Painting has always played a huge role in my life. It's what it, I think painting is the thing that allows me to reconnect with myself. It's like no matter what's going on in my life, I can turn to painting, and it's a space that it holds me, it heals me, it recalibrates me. And again, no matter what's going on in my life, I can go to that space and create beauty. And it also it gives me inspiration and courage to show up in this world. And the other big one for me was joining a suicide loss uh, support sorry, a suicide loss grief support group in 20 that was 2022. For me that was huge. I Every time I share my experience with someone, they would tell me, I can't imagine what you're going through, right? That's people's reaction. And I was just desperate to be around people who could relate to what I was going through. And I remember I joined this group with other women, right, who have lost people, other like family members, or friends or their partners to suicide. And it was a difficult and challenging experience because it's not easy to sit there and to listen to their stories and have your pain reflected back to you. But without realizing, showing up week after week in the process of holding space for their pain, I learned how to hold space for my own pain. And I remember I got to a place where I realized that I could hold all this pain and still live a beautiful life.
Right, right, Paula. Your Substack blog, Between Beauty and Pain.
Mhm.
What does this, title mean?
Between beauty and pain, because I feel those are like the two sides of life, right? Um, I remember when Alex died, a phrase that came to my mind. I don't know if you're familiar with David Goggins, the runner. He's very well known, especially online, because he has overcome all these setbacks and he have like a very tough love kind of communication. And he always says, "Life is not fair. Get used to it." And while I feel that that's absolutely valid and that is true, and that's going to help you move away from a place of victimhood in life once you realize that yes, sometimes things don't work out and it happens to everyone. I feel that when you go through a real tragedy, that's too harsh, right? And you need to invite some softness and some kindness and compassion into your life. And with time, I rephrase that expression because, as I was saying before, when you go through something so horrible, it is very easy for you to connect with to expect more bad things to happen, right? That's easy for you. You're already in that mindset. That already happened to you. But it's not that easy to reconnect with the good things. So I rephrase with time that expression to life is mysterious. And because again, there's just so much that happens in my life and in this world that I can't make sense of. And I don't think I'll ever will. Like, for example, I don't understand why some children are born in abusive families, right? That makes no sense to me. And when someone that you love dies out of nowhere, it makes no sense, right? You don't really know why. And sometimes when people want to say everything happens for a reason, that's the last thing you want to hear. And you don't know if that's true, and that's not even helpful. But when you say life is mysterious, you're allowing for that unknown, right? For that component that you can really explain. But it allows for both. It allows for, yes, sometimes some really terrible things happen, and sometimes some really great things happen out of nowhere. right? Because you, again, you have to start reconnecting again with the possibility of great things happening in your life. And for me, life is that. I feel that through this grief, through this pain, through all the work that I did, I learned to expand my capacity to hold pain, but I also have to learn to expand my capacity for beauty, love, and good and kindness. And for me, that kind of expansion is the true meaning of resilience. And I wanted the blog to kind of capture that.
Right. What about peace? How does the journey to peace beyond all these things look like? Is it attainable? Are you looking for that? Or you have reconciled to living it at the moment?
Yeah, I think that peace, reaching peace, or healing, or whatever you want to call it, I think it's important to remember that healing is an ongoing process, right? It's not like you get there and you're done and you don't need to do any more work, right? I feel that I have to constantly do the work to bring myself to a place of peace. And I remember having this discussion. There's a therapy that I do called Body Talk. And I was discussing with my body talk practitioner. We were talking about trauma. And sometimes I tell her I'm still very triggered after so many years. And she was saying there should be a new word for trauma survivor because the word survivor gives you the impression that you're done, right? That you've reached healing, it's done. And I remember telling her, we already have a word for that. And I think that that word is human beings, right? It's an ongoing process of growing and healing. So I feel I'm there sometimes, and sometimes I have to do the work to bring myself back to a place of peace.
Right, right, Paula. When is your book coming out?
That's a big question. So right now I'm in the process. So I finished the first draft. That was in April this year. Now I found an amazing editor to do the first round of developmental editing. We're going to be working on that by the end of the year and probably in the new year. And then I'm going to start the long process of finding a literary agent and hopefully a book deal. And if that doesn't work, you might see me self-publishing next in 2026. So it's still a long way to come, but in the meantime, there's the blog for everyone. It's free, and I discuss a lot of the things that I share in the book.
Right. There is much to learn about all these things from you, Paula, about between, about beauty, pain, and everything that is between it. So
Mhm.
a lot of people who would want to know more about your story, read me, connect with you on your Substack blog and everything else. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yes, like you mentioned, Substack. I'm there as Paula Di Marco, blog between beauty and pain. I'm also active on Instagram as Paula Di Marco Art. And from there, you'll find all the links to my personal website. It's pauladimarco.art, where you can also find all my artwork. Because I've been creating some new bodies of work, but also illustrating my experience through all of this.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.